as you said, God save the Queen. Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill, joining us again, back now. Good morning to you, Niall. 4 billion people or more viewing this procession and the funeral for one of the world's most beloved members of society. I mean, when you think about it, very few people had the opportunity to sit with the Queen, yet those who did, among some of the most famous in the world. What do you think will be most remembered from this day? I mean, we've been watching the formality of it all. There have been a few moments, but it has been precision. It has been very deliberate and intentional, as we would expect with British tradition. But was there any one particular moment that stood out to you from the entire service?
I think overall, Adrienne, it was the kind of pageantry and precision that you just mentioned. That is what mostly stuck out to me. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, a very small moment that did strike me, was during the funeral service there was a reference to We'll Meet Again, which is actually a song, a Second World War era song by Vera Lynn, the late Vera Lynn, who was one of the Queen's favourite singers. She was, during the Second World War years, known as a singer who sort of boosted national morale. And it just struck me that even though Queen Elizabeth had not ascended to the throne at that stage, she was obviously alive at that point, and she was a connector even as far back as that to the Second World War. A time that many people think of as Britain's finest hour, certainly in the modern age, standing up to Nazi Germany. I thought that was interesting. I also thought in general during the funeral service the amount of emphasis that was placed upon service itself was interesting and was representative of the way Queen Elizabeth was seen. In terms of the visuals of it, obviously there's a lot of visual pageantry to this, and one of the things watching it is that duality for the family, where you see King Charles or the princes performing their royal duties, but also, of course, mourning the death of their mother or grandmother. So that in itself is striking, how people can maintain or do justice to those combined roles, I think.
Yes, and really it has been a very faith-centered funeral, not surprisingly, faith being a huge component of the Queen's life, her memory, her legacy. Just looking at some of the sentences that were read during the procession, or rather prior to the procession during the service. We brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out, in quoting 1 Timothy 6 and 7. And then from the Book of Common Prayer, back from the, 15 and 1600s, they read, "Thou knowest, Lord, the secrets of our hearts. Shut not thy merciful ears unto our prayer, but spare us, Lord most holy." The Queen, certainly someone who put faith above everything, who put service above everything. For those who are watching, we are watching that procession through the streets of London, 1 million people lining miles and miles, I think 22 miles of roadblocks and barriers so that people could actually witness this live and in person. But 4.1 billion people said to be watching this on television, and then who knows how many more people will be watching it on YouTube once it is posted there. But Niall, for all of the leaders in attendance, do you think that they might be inspired now to live more of a life of service? I mean, you would hope that all leaders do, but as all, we are not perfect. But for those who attended, those world leaders from all points of Europe and Asia and, of course, the Americas, do you think that they might be inspired to walk and live a little bit more like Queen Elizabeth after this service?
I would like to believe that you were right in that. I wonder whether that will prove to be the case or not. I mean, I would say that the public service offered by politicians is by its nature different from the public service offered by a monarch, and that is always going to be the case. That said, it would obviously be good if the kind of unity that we're seeing, the kind of connection that we're seeing right now, were to carry over and were to be prolonged after this service. Now, I don't want to inject any sort of contentious note into this, but I mean, we can't entirely separate these events from their political context. There were some nations, notably Russia and Belarus, whose leaders were not invited to the ceremony for, I think, obvious reasons. Other nations, even those with whom the UK has had very tense relations, were invited. So, you know, the politics does, to some extent, impinge on this, even though not in a very conspicuous way. We were talking earlier about the fact that the role of the British monarch is in some ways to be beyond politics and therefore beyond political reproach. That's obviously an important role. It's very difficult for any politician, be it President Biden, be it British Prime Minister Truss or anyone else, to fill that role. Could I just make one more point quickly, Adrienne, when you referred to the Queen's faith? I think that's really important and goes to this switch or this transition between her time and a different era. Defender of the Faith, as you noted earlier, is part of the British monarch's title. The King Charles, when he was Prince Charles, has suggested changing that to Defender of Faith rather than the Faith, suggesting that the monarch should be performing a more open-ended role of protecting the rights of all religious people, and presumably those who ascribe to no religious faith. That has not been the case with the monarchy up until this point, and as you say, the ceremony was perhaps rightfully a very traditional Anglican ceremony this morning.
Yes, and the Queen, of course, a Christian, but there were representatives from Jewish, Baha'i, Buddhist, Muslim, and other faith communities in the procession, as King Charles stressed that the monarchy cannot be solely Anglican. Of course, that was to be inclusive, and that was one thing that Queen Elizabeth was described as, very much someone who welcomed all. From across the Commonwealth and around the world. We know that in terms of who was there, President Biden and Dr. Jill Biden, First Lady, were also present, as well as Ukraine's First Lady. She was present and in attendance. Do you think that was significant? And what has the Queen commented prior to her death on what was happening with the war in Ukraine?
I cannot honestly recall comments made about the war in Ukraine, but I do think it is interesting that the First Lady of Ukraine was there. I believe she met with the Princess of Wales yesterday. I do think that there is clearly a significance in the Ukrainian First Lady being lifted up in that way. Olena Zelenska is her name. And the fact that she was given it's not like that she was given preferential treatment at all, but her presence was clearly very conspicuously noted. I think that goes to something that the Queen, and in particular the late Queen, was very good at, which was sending messages without those messages being particularly explicit or without those messages being necessarily all that controversial. So it is an interesting fact, and it certainly goes to the truth that this will be seen in a broader context.
This has been one of the most memorable days ever televised. The Queen's funeral. Her coffin is now en route to Windsor Castle. Of course, the procession includes the royal vehicles carrying her family members, her children, as well as her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren. This has certainly been a day that will forever be emblazoned on the hearts and minds of those who live in the UK and across the Commonwealth. 70 years on the throne. We saw that funeral that was timed like clockwork, her coffin with the imperial state crown, the orb and the scepter on top of that coffin, that casket. And the Queen's 10 days of mourning complete with this funeral. But it will be interesting to see how many more days Britain reels from the loss of their beloved Queen. Niall, I would have to ask you that one quick question. Do you think, I asked this earlier to one of our other guests, do you think that it will take Britain some time to process this beyond this funeral? And how will that actually play out within government, within Parliament, within the community?
I absolutely do think it will take some time to process, and I can note that in a kind of personal way. For me, I mean, that is the only British monarch that I've ever been aware of. Every time I say King Charles, I have to concentrate on saying King, because he has been Prince Charles for my entire lifetime. So I think that that kind of demonstrates the fact that there is this readjustment that will be needed to be made by people in the UK. As we briefly mentioned earlier, Adrienne, I mean, the UK is in a state of flux, both in terms of specific domestic policy issues, but also the fact that there are tensions within the United Kingdom in terms of both Scotland and Northern Ireland in different ways, loosening or potentially loosening their bonds. So there's a lot to be processed by the people of the United Kingdom. There will clearly be a period of adjustment. And I think one of the big questions that we can't answer at this point, Adrienne, is whether this good feeling toward the monarchy, which has naturally been elicited by these events and by the mourning of the Queen, does that carry over? Does that give the monarchy a new lease of life and affection in the eyes of the British public? Or, absent Queen Elizabeth, with a new king, a little bit down the road, do new questions get raised, both within the United Kingdom, within the Commonwealth, and within the realm of nations that still have the British monarch as their head of state?
Niall Stanage from the Hill, thank you again for being with us.
We're watching live in London right now as the Queen's body is taken from Wellington Arch over to Windsor Castle. Her commitment ceremony will be at St. George's Chapel. There she'll be buried with her husband, who passed away on April 21st of 2021, Prince Philip, preceding her into the grave. We've been saying that there might be 1 million people lining the streets. We've just got new information from London's Mayor Sadiq Khan. There may be twice as many as that.
Wow.
2 million people.
That's significant.
Spanning 5 miles along the River Thames there. This is probably the M4, or some of the city streets that run in between central London, where Westminster Abbey and Wellington Arch are, all the way out to Windsor Castle.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.